Welcome to the fourth Lunch and Learn session in the series on operational excellence. This session's topic is measurement and key performance indicators, aligning performance metrics with the operational excellence strategy. This session is sponsored by Jamestown Community College Workforce Readiness. The session is facilitated by Max Krug from Future State Engineering. We hope that you enjoy the session.
Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining the fourth session on operational excellence. So today we're talking about measurements and key performance indicators, and really how do we align those metrics with our operational excellence strategy. I think a lot of companies overlook the importance of the right metrics and right measurements. And it's such an important piece of the operational excellence for both achieving the right behavior that we need from the people working in the organization, but also sustaining the improvement. So if we want to get significant improvement, that's great, but we need to be able to sustain it. If we're not able to sustain it, then that's a problem, right? We don't want to slip back to old practices. As always, we start with the necessary conditions. So today's session on metrics and measurement is really focused on the first two bullets here, satisfying all the customers' needs and meeting the needs of the organization, which I define as the stakeholders. To be able to see if we're meeting those conditions, we need to measure, and our measurement system is going to tell us how well we're satisfying the customers' needs and also how well we're meeting the needs of the organization. So we talked a lot about focus. So what focus is not is, I put a little cartoon up here. So we got this huge dashboard, and the guy says, our new dashboard has all the different KPIs we can now track. And the one guy says, well, what's that KPI that's trending to 0? He says, that measures how well we understand them all. So the point being here, it's not about having more metrics, it's about having the right metrics. I was in one company, we went into their daily meeting. They literally had four 4x10 whiteboards filled with metrics. Hezi was on that meeting with me. We were like, what is this? Right? There's just hundreds of metrics. And so we said to him, it's a dashboard, not a cockpit. Right? So the dashboard concept is, think about your dashboard in your car. There's only a few things I need to understand to make sure that the car is functioning properly, right? I don't need to know all the different functions of the car, how they're performing. So getting down to the critical few measurements is very important, and it's not easy, right? So we got to break that paradigm of more measurement is good. No, less measurement of the right measurement is better. So what's the purpose of measurement? So one of the purposes of measurement is to provide judgment on how the current state of the organization is performing, right? So that's a lot of our financial measurements of how we're doing financially, how's the company performing. But also, more important, we want measurement to induce people in the organization to take action that's aligned with the goal. Our last session, we talked about the importance of having that mission and vision statement and establishing the direction of the organization. Once we establish the direction of the organization, we got to make sure that the measurement system is aligned with that. If there's misalignment, we're not going to get the behaviors that we're looking for to achieve the goal. And of course, we're not going to meet the goal. Third, to provide immediate feedback on the effectiveness of the decision-making process. So this is important because we don't want to wait weeks or months to see what the outcome of the decision is. We need to know immediately when we make a decision, was that the correct decision or not? If it wasn't the correct decision, then we need to recalibrate our decision making and make the correct decision that's aligned with our strategy. So Dr. Goldratt had a statement. He said, tell me how you measure me and I'll tell you how I will behave. So people behave in the way that they're measured. And it might not be measurements that we physically take, it might be perception of how people are measured. So if we don't change the perception or we don't change the measurement system that's aligned with our goals or our strategy, we're not going to get the right behavior. So to give an example of how powerful measurement is, I want to turn back to the issue with Wells Fargo back in probably 2015 or so. So what was the Wells Fargo scandal? Wells Fargo was the CEO was trying to drive stock price up. How do you drive stock price up? You show growth in the company. How do you show growth in a company? By showing new accounts being opened and more people coming over to Wells Fargo to do their banking. Well, people were committing fraud to meet the goal. That's the power of measurement. So people were opening false accounts. They were opening multiple accounts for people, their friends and family. So that's how powerful measurement is. If people are willing to commit fraud to meet the goal, that's a powerful statement. So if we have the wrong behaviors, make sure we change our measurement system to get the right behaviors. So key performance indicators. What are key performance indicators? So these provide information on how well the organization is meeting and will achieve its objectives. I call them the vital signs of the company. So these are key to the organization's success. So that's why it says key performance indicator, not just performance indicator. The vital signs, therefore, represent the critical things to understand what's the health of the company. So if we think about the vital signs for ourselves, what are our vital signs? Our temperature, our heart rate, our blood pressure, those are the vital signs. So if my blood pressure, my heart rate, and my temperature are within normal range, I'm fairly healthy. It's the same thing for an organization. So we don't want to have more than 6 KPIs. Those 6 KPIs can define the health of the organization. Second, they need to be a combination of customer focused and internal focused. So if we understand our customer needs, we probably want to have some metrics that are aligned with the needs of the customer. And if we have goals for the organization, they need to be aligned with the goals of our organization. And third, they need to be leading indicators. So many companies use lagging indicators. We want them to be leading indicators. So probably ask the question, what's lagging and what's leading? So lagging indicators are measurements of past performance that measures how well the organization did in the previous week, the previous month, the previous quarter. And a leading indicator is a predictive measurement that indicates the future success of the organization. Now, it's hard to come up with leading indicators because most people are conditioned to lagging type, oh, this is how we did last quarter, this is how we did last month. So the analogy I want to use here is driving your car. So a lagging indicator would be I'm looking in the rear view mirror to drive home, right? So I'm looking backwards to see how I'm going to go forward. Versus a leading indicator, we really want to look out the front windshield. So don't try this tonight, but how far would you get if you tried to drive home tonight by looking in your rear view mirror? Not very far. So if we take that back to a company, what would be an example of a lagging indicator and what would be an example of a leading indicator? So sales revenue, so how we did for the last quarter or the last month on revenue on our financial statement would be a lagging indicator. A leading indicator might be what's our current sales backlog. If we have low sales backlog, then most likely we're going to have low revenue. So we need to change the focus of the people. Instead of looking backwards, turn them around and start looking forward. So I want to explain the importance of measurement, and I'd like to use an analogy, the chain analogy. So the reason I use a chain, because a physical chain acts and responds like a company. So each link in the chain here represents a department. Okay, so we have multiple departments. There's dependencies between the departments. So if one person does one activity, the second person can't start that activity until the first person finishes. each department has capacity. Okay, so there's two ways we can measure this chain. The first way to measure it is by measuring its weight. So the weight of the chain acts like cost in a company. How do I determine the weight? So if I know the weight of each link, how would I determine the weight of the chain? Well, I just add up all those links in the chain, and that gives me the weight of the chain. So the weight of the chain follows the additive rule, just like cost in a company. Cost follows the additive rule. So if I add the cost of one department plus the cost of another department plus the cost of a third department, I add up all the departments in the company, I can get the total cost to run that business. But there's another way we can measure the chain, is by its strength. So strength represents capacity. It's our ability to generate throughput or to generate sales. So if I look at the capacity of each link, so I have these different links that have different capacities, how strong is the chain? Well, it's determined by the weakest link. So you can see this one link here only has a capacity of 950. So if I were to put stress on this chain and start adding weight to the chain, when's it going to break? About 950 pounds, the chain's going to break. So why is this important in terms of measurement? So let's talk about these two measurements. If the goal of the organization is to reduce costs, we call the cost reduction strategy, how would I reduce the weight of the chain? Or if the goal was to strengthen the chain, how would I strengthen it? So I believe that every company's goal should be to strengthen the chain, not make it lighter. Okay, so let's talk about actions, how I would make the chain lighter. So if I wanted to make the chain lighter, one way I could do is to remove a link. So I can take this link and remove it, and the chain will be lighter. That's comparable to outsourcing work to an outside supplier. Okay, another way I can make the chain lighter is I can reduce the capacity of this link. So I can take some material and make the link smaller. That relates to laying off people, right? So I can lay off people in the department and make that link in the chain lighter. Or I could find a new technology that has the same capability but is lighter weight. So that would be bringing in a new technology in an area that's not the weakest link, right? Makes the chain lighter, doesn't make the chain stronger. So all those activities are actions we can take to make the chain lighter, but it doesn't strengthen the chain. How can I strengthen the chain? There's only one way to strengthen the chain, and that's right here, make this link stronger. Any action I do to any other link in the chain isn't going to make the chain stronger, only action to this one. So in reality, I need to get more capacity from that resource. So we know that every process can be improved and improved significantly. So to increase the strength of this link is not that difficult, and we can improve the strength of the whole chain. So you notice the actions to reduce the weight of the chain and the actions to strengthen the chain are totally different. So if we have our measurement system aligned with actions to reduce cost, we're never going to strengthen the chain. Vice versa, we need measurements that are geared at strengthening the chain. So take a look at your own organization, look at your metrics, and understand how many metrics do I have that are focused on cost reduction? How many metrics do I have focused on strengthening the organization in terms of the ability to generate value added? Okay, that's the goal of operational excellence. Strengthen the chain to generate the ability to generate value added at a faster rate. Okay, so if we look at an overview of this session, first of all, measurement system isn't about having more metrics, it's about having the right metrics. Having more measurements isn't the solution, having the right measurements is. I wrote an article, you can see it on our blog, it talks about turning a sea of data into data we can see. So many companies are overwhelmed with the amount of data that they collect. And of course, nobody's doing anything with the data. So Dr. Deming would say, stop measuring that data and collecting that data if nobody's going to use it to change our decision-making process. So taking that sea of data, turning it into metrics, data we can see. What does that mean? So if it's data we can see, it's the critical vital signs of our business, and we can monitor the health, and they're leading indicators, not lagging indicators. So what's the foundation of a good measurement system? One, it needs to be simple and easily understood at all levels of the organization. So I was in one organization, they have a bunch of assets that they rent, and so we're trying to come up with a metric we can measure their utilization of their assets. And the finance guy came up with this metric, and so the metric was return on invested capital. So I think the metric should be return on invested capital. So I said to him, what does that mean? How do you measure that? He goes, I don't know, I got to go look it up in the book. You're the finance guy. If you can't understand it, how's the guy out in the field going to understand it? Okay, so it can't be this complex metric that nobody understands. Okay, so it's got to be simple and easy. It needs to be timely feedback. So the more immediate the feedback, the better. I prefer daily feedback. If we can't get daily, then it needs to be weekly at the latest. Wait until the end of the month, wait until the end of the quarter, too long. But if they're leading indicators, that's even better. Okay, so we want leading indicators, and the information provided needs to induce people to take action that are aligned with the objectives and are aligned with the company's mission, vision, and strategy. Okay, so these are the foundations that we need in place of a good measurement system. So that's today's session. Again, if you want more information, you can visit our websites. Also, upcoming series. I don't know if Delaney, you want to talk briefly about the upcoming sessions?
Sure. Thank you, Max. And I want to thank JCC's Workforce Readiness Department as well as Future State Engineering for today's session. We do have a couple of upcoming lunch and learns. May 20th is building accountability into the process. May 27th is achieving buy-in through the Socratic approach, which is basically how to ask leading questions or questions that elicit more information. And then June 3rd is improving flow. So we hope to see everybody at these sessions.
So I just want to make a quick note about the session next week. So part of measurement isn't making that a stick that we can beat people with. Okay, so the purpose of measurement isn't to beat people when they don't perform correctly. So next session is going to tie into this session. How do we build accountability into the process so that people are held accountable to doing what's aligned with our strategy, and we're not using the measurement system to beat them with. So I think at this point we want to open it up for questions or comments.
Yes, and I have a question for you from the chat. It says, is it practical to have organizational KPIs to guide the organization and also have supporting departmental functional KPIs?
Yeah, so the KPIs are the 6 vital signs that I'm talking about. So those are the health of the organization. The lower level department ones need to be aligned with it. So I don't call those KPIs, I call them, departmental measures, but they have to be aligned with the KPIs. Okay, so if we look at if I go back to the sales one and say, okay, our sales revenue is what typically people mean. We really want to measure sales backlog. So what's the health of new orders coming into the organization? So if I want to talk about salespeople, what should their goal be, right? It's not bringing in any sales, it's bringing in the right sales. Okay, so you just don't go out and get anything or anything that you can get. It's sales that are good for the organization. So any measurements for the salespeople needs to be aligned with that goal. It's not just bringing in any sales I can bring in. I've seen too many organizations bring in sales that aren't good for the organization, and then they struggle operationally to deliver that product or service, right? Which indicates that, a poor month in revenue. So define the KPIs, the lower level metrics for the people in the department need to be aligned with those. Hopefully that answered your question. Any other questions? Comments?
Max, I wanted to add that the chain analysis analogy and the increasing of the weakest link, that is the reason why we can make such a huge improvement in performance in a very, very short period of time, because we are focusing the efforts in a one place, and that influence on the whole system, and it's kind of almost immediate. That's why we can, even in 72 hours, we can improve throughput dramatically when we clean up all the buy-in and all the process. We just go and do it on the weakest link, then it's immediately strength the whole chain, and we get more throughput immediately. So
Yes.
that's I wanted to add that because that's tied to this chain analogy, of course, that makes it valid or viable.
Yes. So let me go back to our definition of focus, right? Doing what should be done. So if strengthening the chain is our goal, doing what should be done is what? Getting the capacity of this resource up, period. Doing what shouldn't be done, don't worry about all these other links in the chain. Strengthening them doesn't help us. And sometimes weakening them, right, lowering the cost, hurts the system. So I have an example of a company that they started to go out and buy cheaper materials. So the purchasing guy was under the cost reduction. Oh, I'm going to get the cheapest materials I can. What happened? Tooling costs tripled in the company. Okay, so it's taking action in one department to reduce costs that has huge negative effects in another department. So then the guy in charge of the tooling department is getting beat on because he's over budget. It's not his fault. He's a victim of the system.
And it cost a lot to focus on the other links than the weakest link. There is cost for that. Cost is time and money that you put in doing that.
So you can imagine the effect of if this department was the weakest link and we just increased the number of tooling changes by 3x, how devastating that is for the company. So great point, Hezi.
The second comment that I wanted to add is the company that we went in with the cockpit and the dashboard.
Yes.
So the problem is not that the whole wall and was filled with huge numbers that nobody understood, like you said, even what is there. Is also the waste of time of everybody standing in front of this wall for a whole hour, going through that. No decisions or insights or enlightenment were to be found in that process. Nobody,
yes.
they read the numbers, which was even not tied to the company goals or anything. They just read the numbers for an hour with all the department heads and people from, like, probably there were 15 people over there for hours, 15 hours a day. They are losing to look at a wall and go through it. Nobody knew what they, like, after 5 minutes, asked what did you learn about it? They said nothing. So it's a very common in companies, obviously, that they are not they like to be pilots than manufacturing. I would assume.
Yes.
So
Right. The metric needs to change the decision-making process. If it doesn't change the decision-making process, get rid of it.
yeah.
Hey, Max, could you talk more about what you just said there? About the metric having to, could you elaborate on what you just said about that? The metric in the
About
decision process?
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about that as a process itself.
Yeah. So we want the metrics to induce people to do what's right for the organization, right? So to make the right decisions. So if the metric is there and it's not changing my decision-making ability, why are we doing it, right? Again, most times I see people using that as a stick to beat the people when they don't meet the goal, right? That's not the purpose of measurement. So we need to make sure that people understand the goal, right? So that's the first problem. Most companies don't have a goal that's aligned. People don't understand it. Then the measurement system isn't aligned with that goal. And then we're measuring people to the wrong objectives. And then we're using it as a stick to beat them, right? So we talked about the culture. That's part of the problem with a poor culture. Once we change the measurement system, then we align that and give people the ability to make decisions. And we're going to talk about that next week in building accountability in the process. It's giving the people in the process the ability to make the right decisions. Okay, so I don't know if that answered the question or the comment.
Well, it does elaborate on it, and it actually went to the emphasis that I have in our conversations outside of here, which is you are recognizing that the metrics are the engine of behavioral of the
Yes.
behaviors, and that it's the behaviors that produce the culture.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
Cannot emphasize that enough. If what you're out to do is build culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, Max, do you want also to tell about, for example, a local measurement versus a global measurement, like per ton measurement on a specific department versus how it's influenced on the whole system?
Yeah. So one was the purchasing one I talked about, but I saw another company that was measuring tons per hour through each department. So they did big components and small components. When I'm measuring tons per hour, what am I going to get? Everyone's going to work on the big things and nobody's going to work on the small things. But in final assembly, I need both big and small components to put the assembly together. So they're measuring tons per hour. And so before I even went to assembly, I knew what I was going to see. What do you expect I was going to see? All big components and no little components. So all jobs are delayed, waiting for the small stuff to arrive. So that's the local optima, right? It's we need to get more out every day from every machine. No, we need to get the right stuff out every day of every machine, right? That's aligned with what final assembly needs, that's aligned with what the customer needs. And just going and telling people, okay, we're no longer going to measure that, isn't going to happen because they've been measuring it for 50 years, right? People are conditioned to that measurement. So it's extremely hard to uncondition those people.
Just not to flatter you, but like this is what's so elegant about this. Why I find this so powerful is that you're explaining a very straightforward empirical way to align a culture with its market.
Yes.
And so that it becomes this thing that serves the market. Like that's the culture of it. That's what's so powerful about this, in my opinion.
Is Norm on the call today?
I didn't see him.
Norm, if you're on the call, can you talk a little bit about FisherPrice when you worked there?
Oh, he is.
Hi, Max. I'm here. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
So Norm and I had a discussion about when Norm worked at FisherPrice and culture. So I'd like you to share that if you could.
Oh, okay, the cultural thing. I was telling Max when we were talking all about this how interesting it was working at Fisher-Price. I worked there on two different stints, 7 years the first time and 8 years the second time. A little bit of gap in between. But what I told Max, which was really interesting, and maybe it's because of the product which we made, which were children's toys and juvenile products. It was the culture was amazing because I guess everyone understood we were making children's toys or products, and no one wanted to make a defective product. Everyone realized the products were costly, and everyone realized that the products were well made. And that was also just when you were there, you just gained this knowledge about the company and how well the products were built and designed. But the other side was everybody, when you went to one of the plants that we had for years and years in the US, even in Holland, New York, and Medina, New York, somewhere around 900 to 1,400 people, they wouldn't build a bad product. Everybody on their index conveyor, which was like an assembly line for toys, every piece they put onto the jig was right. They would look at each piece, like you talk about, everybody's responsible for their own quality, but they would literally pull out pieces if they were impartially molded. A screw didn't go in right for some reason, cross-threading. It was just an interesting thing because it was just the culture that Fisher-Price had developed. And when people started there, you were inundated with it. It was just a very interesting thing to see compared to any other company I've been in. It truly was, because everybody was parents. And I think everyone realized that they love their kids. They want their kids to be safe. It was just a very interesting culture, and it was throughout the company, literally from the top down. It was just something that's understood. So, Max, I'm not sure where you wanted to go with me, but we had this discussion because I said, how do you build that culture into other businesses? How do you make it?
So the interesting thing there was that the people producing the product were also the customer.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the difference. So how many companies do you know that the people building the product is the customer? Not many, but we need to build that culture that you're going to be the one using this product. It gives you a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is the project. That is like what gets me up every day is how do we do that? How do we develop that as a technology that you can put it in a box and people can buy it like they can buy a website now. You can buy a website in a box right now.
Yep.
It's a free open source website. So if you just know how to do the pieces that need to be done so that it's your website, 20 years ago, that of course wasn't the case.
Also, Max, I'm sorry, Kathleen, maybe I'm taking your job for a second. There is a question over here in the chat. Measuring the right KPI is critical. How does an organization identify and create the correct KPI?
So we talk a little bit our design sprint. That's what we do in our design sprint. And how we do it in the design sprint is we come up with alignment of, okay, what are we trying to achieve? And we find where there's misalignments of that goal we're trying to achieve. So let's just say we want to be highest reliable, shortest lead time supplier in the market, right? So if we define that, so what's our decisive competitive advantage? So if we have a decisive competitive advantage that we talked about in the previous session, right, about that removing a significant limitation, if that's our goal, then okay, what are the critical success factors that we need to achieve that support that goal? So part of the design sprint, we actually define those critical success factors for the company in all the functions that support the goal. Then when we define those critical success factors, then we develop the KPIs from that. So if short lead time is a significant need for the customer, okay, what critical success factor do we need to have in place to satisfy short lead time? Okay, so we need extra capacity, right? Or we reserve capacity for certain markets. So that reserve capacity is held for certain customers or certain markets that demand short lead time. We don't offer that to other markets. And then we got to have a measurement system to make sure that we're performing to that need. So it's a process you got to go through to define those KPIs. I don't know if that answered the question. And again, it works backwards.
It's interesting.
Right?
It's interesting. So like where you could start with that, just to sort of talk about it in a meta way, and without being able to take a specific situation, because every situation is specific.
Yep.
It seems to me, and I'm just riffing with you on this question. So it seems to me that where you want to start with is what is your, whose money are you really working with? So it's like, so the customer.
No,
So
You're killing me, Chris.
What?
You're killing me.
that's not me.
So go ahead, Chris.
The ultimately what you want to be working with is you don't want to finance anything. You want to be working with the customer's money, in theory. So it seems to me like the first question is, who is it we're trying to serve? Who's exchanging money for value? If you start there, that really is the thing that you come back to a lot in the brief time I've been learning about how you.
So what's the need, right? So the people that's paying for that value, what's their need, right? If we don't understand that need, that's the first problem. We understand that need, and then okay, how are we going to design our operational excellence system to deliver on that need? Then once we determine that, then let's set up the KPIs to align with that strategy, right? So we don't start with KPIs and then go backwards. We start with need, strategy, KPIs. Really, I would put in critical success factors, then KPIs below that.
and basically to get to that, Chris, if I can add, Max, is that we have the process of looking of what is the current reality, and then in that process we identify the needs of the customers, and then we identify what is the future state that will meet that need. And the last thing is how to change or how to get to that reality. And this is where all the actions comes into play and the sequence of them, and to fulfill the success factors and what the measurements that will be able, or the key performance that will be able to tie to that in order to drive our change and drive our behaviors and the operational and organizational success. So everything is tied, and it's not specifically for the money or who using or who exchanging. This comes all in the first stage in the process of discovery, and putting it in a cause and effect manner that will know what is really the needs of the company. The needs of the customers, which drive the goals of the company. Make sense?
Yeah, and now to take it one step further to what we're talking about outside of here, what if we start with there is no existing state? There is a vision for an enterprise and a customer, somebody who it is you want to serve, and then you'd have to flip. You'd have to start with the future state and then address the elements of whatever the reality is.
Yes. So
to organize
that's easier because we don't have to change the bad behaviors.
Yeah. Right. Well, it is. Yeah, it is and it isn't. But because I've got some things to report when we get on later.
So we'll talk about it offline, of course.
But our operational excellence workshop gets into detail how that's done. So, okay. Any other comments, questions? So good discussion today. I like when there's good discussion because that gives me feedback. It's interesting for people or not.
Thank you, Max. It was great. Not like the other ones. This one was great.
Thanks.
No, they all were. Thank you, really.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you again next week for our next topic.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.